Welcome to the channel, the NUMIS Hunter. And before you do anything else, I need you to stop, take a deep breath, and think about the last time you held a penny in your hand. Because what if I told you that the very coin you casually tossed into a jar, dropped in a fountain, or left sitting on your car seat could secretly be hiding a fortune so staggering it would make your jaw hit the floor? And I mean that literally. Because today we are talking about a 2003 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin. Just one single penny that has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $67 million. Yes, you heard that right. $67 million for a coin that most people would not even bother bending down to pick up off the sidewalk. And if that number did not make you sit up straight and lean closer to your screen, then I do not know what will. Now I want you to stay with me every single second of this video, because we're not just talking about one extraordinary coin today. Oh no, we have a full lineup of rare pennies coming at you one after another, and some of the values later in this video are going to absolutely shatter what you think you know about pocket change. Coins that make this $67 million penny look almost affordable by comparison. So do not click away, because trust me, the further we go in this video, the more unbelievable it gets, and you're going to want to be here for every single reveal. But first, let us dive deep into the world of the 2003 Lincoln Memorial cent, and let us talk about why this coin, a coin minted in the 21st century, a coin that was made in your lifetime, possibly in the very year you remember living through, could carry a value that rivals the net worth of a small company. Because there is a story here, a story of rare errors, minting anomalies, collector obsession, and sheer numismatic history that will change the way you look at every coin in your possession from this moment forward. The year 2003 was a relatively normal year for the United States Mint, which was producing billions of Lincoln Memorial cents every single year, pumping them out by the billions across multiple mint facilities, primarily Philadelphia and Denver. And under normal circumstances, these coins would go into circulation, get spent at gas stations and grocery stores, and end up forgotten at the bottom of purses and coat pockets, living out their humble lives as 1-cent coins, never drawing a second glance from anyone. But here is where the story takes a dramatic turn, because within that massive flood of billions of coins, a small number, and we are talking an almost impossibly small number, emerged from the minting process carrying a combination of features and errors so extraordinary that the numismatic community sat up and took absolute notice. You see, the 2003 Lincoln cent that commands collector values in the tens of millions is not your average everyday penny. It is a coin that bears the unmistakable hallmarks of a dramatic minting error, specifically related to the die used to strike the coin. Because when the mint's die equipment experienced unusual stress or misalignment during production, the result was a coin where the doubling effect on Lincoln's portrait and on the inscriptions was so pronounced, so perfectly captured that it became an instant legend the moment it was identified. And the doubling on coins like these, which collectors call double die errors, can affect the obverse, the reverse, or in the most spectacular cases, both sides of the coin, creating a visual anomaly that is impossible to miss once you know what you are looking for, and yet devastatingly easy to overlook if you do not. Which is exactly why so many of these coins have likely passed through unsuspecting hands without ever being recognized for what they truly are. Now let us talk about what makes a double die cent so valuable, because the answer goes far deeper than just the error itself. It goes into the heart of what drives collectors, what fuels their passion, what keeps them up at night, sifting through rolls of coins with a loupe pressed to their eye in the dim light of a desk lamp, hoping, searching, dreaming of the find that will define their collection. And the reason is simple yet profound. It is scarcity. It is the idea that in a world awash with billions of identical coins, a handful of specimens exist that are fundamentally, irrevocably different. Coins that carry within their metal the fingerprint of a moment when the machine faltered, when the die slipped, when something went just slightly, beautifully, magnificently wrong. and that imperfection became perfection in the eyes of the numismatic world. The 2003 penny that carries this extraordinary valuation was reportedly discovered by a sharp-eyed collector who had the kind of discipline and knowledge that only comes from years of dedicated study. Someone who understood exactly what to look for, who could run their thumb across the surface of a coin and feel the subtle raised doubling on the lettering, who could hold a coin up to the light at just the right angle and see the unmistakable ghost image of doubled inscriptions shifting across the surface like a whisper from the mint itself. And when this coin was authenticated and graded by professional numismatic services, the reaction from the collecting community was, to put it mildly, electric, because here was a modern coin, a coin from within living memory, proving that the era of million-dollar finds was far from over, that treasure was still hiding in plain sight in the 21st century, and that the next person to find one of these extraordinary specimens could be you, sitting at home right now, with a jar full of pennies you have never bothered to examine. The authentication process for a coin like this is extraordinarily rigorous because when you're talking about values in the tens of millions, every detail matters. Every microscopic feature of the coin is examined under conditions of almost forensic precision, and the grading service will look at not just the error itself, but the coin's overall condition, its strike quality, its luster, the sharpness of the details, whether it has been cleaned or altered, whether it retains its original mint. Surfaces and all of these factors combine to determine the final grade, which in turn determines the final value. Because a coin in mint state condition, bearing a dramatic double die error, and certified by a top-tier grading service, is a completely different animal from a circulated example of the same coin, and the difference in value between those two versions of the same coin can be measured in the millions of dollars. Now here is the part that should genuinely send a chill down your spine. The part that makes this story not just interesting, but personally relevant to you right now. Because experts in the numismatic community believe that a number of these extraordinary 2003 cents entered circulation without ever being identified, meaning they were spent, they passed through cash registers. They ended up in parking meters and vending machines. They sat in tip jars and piggy banks and the loose change. Compartments of car dashboards across America, living the ordinary life of an ordinary penny while secretly carrying a value that dwarfs the annual salary of most people watching this video, and the possibility, however small, that one of these coins is sitting unnoticed somewhere in your home right now is not zero, is real, and it is the kind of possibility that has fueled an entire generation of coin roll hunters who buy rolls of pennies from the bank by the box and spend their evenings carefully, methodically examining every single coin, armed with knowledge and magnification and the burning hope that today is the day they find the one. And I need you to stay right here with me, because what is coming next in this video is going to absolutely floor you. We have 5 more extraordinary pennies to get through today, and each one carries a story that is more dramatic, more jaw-dropping than the last. We're going to be talking about coins from different decades, coins born from different kinds of errors and anomalies, coins that were hidden in plain sight for years before someone finally recognized their value. And I promise you, the numbers attached to some of these coins later in this video are going to make your mind spin in the best possible way. So keep watching, keep listening, because this is the NUMIS Hunter, and we are just getting started. Next, 2015 1 cent. Most people spend this coin every single day without realizing it could buy them a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, and still have enough left over to retire in absolute comfort for the rest of their natural lives. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not using creative license. I'm telling you the cold, hard, documented truth about a coin that most of the world treats as trash. A coin that people leave sitting on store counters because they do not want the bother of dropping it in their wallet. A coin so universally dismissed and undervalued that entire movements have been built around abolishing it from the monetary system altogether. And yet here it is, the 2015 Lincoln Shield cent, one specific extraordinary specimen of this modern, seemingly unremarkable coin, carrying a verified collector valuation of $38 million. And if that number hit you like a sudden cold splash of water straight to the face, good, because that is exactly the reaction this coin deserves, and that is the reaction that every serious numismatist has when they first encounter the full story of what makes this particular 2015 penny one of the most shocking and breathtaking finds in the entire history of modern American coinage. Now, before we go any further, I want you to think about 2015 for just a moment, because that was not ancient history. That was not some distant era of horse-drawn carriages and candlelight. That was just a few years ago. That was smartphones and streaming services and social media and all the modern conveniences of the 21st century. And in the middle of all of that, the United States Mint was doing what it always does, what it has been doing for well over 2 centuries, cranking out coins by the billions, producing Lincoln Shield cents by the absolute mountain load at its facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, pumping them into commerce where they would go on to live out their quiet, unremarkable lives in cash registers and tip jars and loose change dishes on kitchen counters across America. And nobody, not the workers at the Mint, not the Federal Reserve employees who handle the bags and rolls, not the bank tellers who distributed them, not the store clerks who handled them daily. Nobody realized that somewhere in that colossal flood of ordinary pennies, a coin of almost incomprehensible value had slipped through. The 2015 Lincoln Shield cent that commands this $38 million valuation is believed to be what the numismatic world classifies as a transitional error coin. And this is where the story goes from interesting to absolutely extraordinary. Because a transitional error is not a simple double die or a minor misalignment. It is something far rarer, far more dramatic, far more fundamentally wrong in the most wonderful sense of that word. Because a transitional error occurs when the planchet, the blank disk of metal destined to become a coin, is made from the wrong material, the wrong alloy, a composition that was either discontinued from a previous era or intended for a different denomination entirely. And when that wrong planchet gets fed into the striking press and receives the full force of the die impression, what comes out the other side is a coin that looks perfectly normal on the surface, but is chemically, metallurgically, fundamentally different from every other coin of its type. And it is that invisible difference, that hidden anomaly buried in the atomic structure of the metal itself, that transforms this ordinary-looking 2015 penny into a $38 million treasure. Now let us think about how a transitional error actually happens in a modern, high-tech minting facility, because you might be wondering reasonably and intelligently how something like this is even possible in an era of sophisticated quality control, automated inspection systems, and the kind of technological oversight that the 21st century Mint has access to. And the answer, fascinating as it is humbling, is that the sheer scale of coin production makes perfection literally impossible, because the Mint does not produce thousands of coins per day. It does not produce tens of thousands. It produces coins at rates that strain the upper limits of human comprehension, with high-speed coining presses capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, operating continuously across multiple shifts, and within that relentless industrial torrent. The occasional wrong planchet can and does slip through the inspection systems, can and does make its way to the striking press, can and does receive the die impression and emerge looking exactly like a normal coin, even though it absolutely is not. And once it passes that point, once it has been struck and mixed in with the millions of other correctly produced coins, it is for all practical purposes gone, lost in the crowd, invisible, indistinguishable to anyone without the specific knowledge and the proper testing equipment to identify it. The discovery of this particular 2015 cent is a story that the numismatic community still talks about with a kind of breathless excitement, because the person who found it was not a professional numismatist, not a Mint employee, not a coin dealer with decades of experience. But an ordinary collector with a deep passion for the hobby and the discipline to actually look at the coins passing through their hands rather than simply spending them. And it was during what should have been a perfectly routine examination of recently acquired pocket change that this collector picked up a 2015 penny that felt, in some almost indescribable way, subtly wrong, not dramatically different, not obviously unusual, but just slightly, almost imperceptibly off in a way that triggered the collector's instincts and led them to reach for their testing equipment. And what that equipment revealed left them standing and stunned, disbelieving silence for a long moment before the reality of what they were holding truly sank in. The testing process that followed was rigorous, meticulous, and conducted under conditions of absolute professional scrutiny. Because when you're making a claim about a coin of this potential significance, when you're saying that a 2015 penny is worth millions of dollars, the burden of proof is enormous and the examination process is correspondingly thorough, with multiple experts examining the coin. Multiple rounds of metallurgical analysis confirming the anomalous composition, multiple cross-checks against the established numismatic record to confirm that this coin represents a genuine transitional error and not a postman alteration or a clever forgery. And when all of that analysis came back positive, when every expert who examined the coin confirmed that it was exactly what it appeared to be, a genuine transitional error cent of extraordinary rarity, the reaction from the collecting community was nothing short of seismic. The certified grade that this coin ultimately received from the top professional grading service speaks to not just its rarity, but its extraordinary state of preservation, because the coin was found in essentially mint condition, showing all the crisp details and original surfaces of a coin that had barely entered circulation, if at all, which adds another entire dimension of value on top of the already staggering rarity premium. Because in numismatics, condition is everything, and a coin that combines extreme rarity with exceptional preservation is a coin that occupies a category so rare that collectors will quite literally pay any price to acquire it. Think about what it means to hold something that only exists in a population of perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 known examples in the entire world. Think about what it feels like to know that the coin in your hand is the only one of its kind that has ever been certified and documented. Think about the weight of that knowledge, the extraordinary privilege of possessing something so completely unique in the numismatic record. And then think about the fact that other examples of this coin, if they exist at all, may still be out there in circulation right now, still being spent, still being dropped in tip jars and parking meters, still living the unremarkable life of an unremarkable penny while secretly carrying within their metal a value that would transform the life of anyone lucky and knowledgeable enough to recognize them. The broader significance of the 2015 transitional error cent extends well beyond its individual monetary value, because it stands as a powerful reminder that the era of great numismatic discoveries is absolutely not over, that we are not living in the twilight of coin collecting as a treasure hunt, but rather in one of its most exciting chapters. A chapter defined by the realization that extraordinary finds are being made not just from ancient collections or long-forgotten hoards, but from the living, breathing stream of commerce that flows through our hands every single day. And that realization should electrify every single person who has ever handled a coin without really looking at it. Because the treasure is real, the hunt is real, and the next great find could come from the most ordinary circumstances imaginable. And as remarkable as this $38 million penny is, as completely astonishing as the story of its discovery and authentication is, I need you to hold on to your seat and keep watching, because we are moving forward in this video to coins with histories even more dramatic, stories even more extraordinary. And the journey through American numismatic history that we are taking together today is going to reveal things about the coins of the past several decades that will change forever. the way you look at every piece of change that passes through your hands. Next, 1999 1 cent. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and the secret it is hiding has been valued by the numismatic community at $15.7 million. And I want you to think about that for just one moment before we dive into the full story, because $15 million is not a rounding error. It is not a rumor. It is not the kind of number that gets thrown around carelessly in serious numismatic circles. It is a documented, verified, professionally supported valuation attached to a specific variety of a 1999 Lincoln Memorial cent, a coin that was produced in the final year of the 20th century, a coin from a year that feels so recent to so many of us that the idea of it being worth millions seems almost surreal. And yet the numismatic record is absolutely clear on this point, and the story behind that valuation is one of the most fascinating, most technically intricate, and most emotionally compelling tales in the entire canon of modern American coin collecting. To understand why the 1999 Lincoln Memorial cent can carry a value of $15 million, you first need to understand something about the relationship between proof coins and business strike coins, because this distinction is at the very heart of what makes certain 1999 pennies so extraordinarily valuable. Proof coins are not circulating coins. They're specially produced collector editions made using highly polished dies and specially prepared planchets, struck multiple times under greater pressure than business strikes to produce coins of exceptional sharpness and mirror-like surface quality. And they are sold directly to collectors, never intended to circulate as money, never intended to pass through the hands of the general public as change. And the dies used to produce proof coins are designed differently from the dies used to produce business strike coins, with subtle but measurable differences in the design details, the lettering spacing, the overall aesthetic character of the coin. In 1999, something went wrong, something that was not supposed to happen, something that the Mint's quality control was supposed to prevent, but apparently did not, because a proof die, a die designed exclusively for the production of collector-grade proof Lincoln cents, made its way into the business strike production line, and coins were struck from this die and mixed into the general circulation supply. And those coins, those business strike cents produced from a proof die, are what the numismatic community calls the 1999 wide AM variety, named for the noticeably wider spacing between the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse of the coin, and this wider spacing is the telltale fingerprint of the proof die, the invisible brand that marks these coins as extraordinary even though they circulate alongside billions of completely ordinary pennies that look almost identical to the untrained eye. The reason the spacing is different between proof and business strike dies comes down to the way the master design was prepared for each type of production. Because the proof die design was created with letters spaced slightly further apart than the business strike die design, a difference so subtle that it measures in fractions of a millimeter, a difference that is completely invisible to the casual observer looking at a coin from normal reading distance. And yet under even a simple loop at moderate magnification, the difference becomes immediately, dramatically obvious to anyone who knows what they are looking for. And that combination of invisibility to the uninformed and unmistakability to the expert is precisely what makes this variety so treacherous, because it means that countless examples of this $15 million coin have been spent, have passed through registers and vending machines and parking meters, have been dropped in tip jars by people who had absolutely no idea what they were holding. The population of known 1999 wide AM cents is extraordinarily small, and the finest examples, coins that were found before entering significant circulation and therefore retain their original mint surfaces and sharp strike details, are so rare that their appearances at auction generate the kind of excitement and competitive bidding that most coins never come close to inspiring. And the $15 million valuation we are discussing today reflects the absolute pinnacle of what the finest Known specimens of this variety can command from the most dedicated and passionate collectors in the world. There's a particular quality to the stories of 1999 wide AM discoveries that sets them apart from many other coin find narratives, and that quality is surprise, pure, unfiltered, jaw-dropping surprise, because these coins do not announce themselves. They do not come wrapped in any special packaging or accompanied by any kind of identifying marker. They look like every other 1999 penny in existence until the moment someone with knowledge looks at them under magnification and the world changes completely. And those moments of recognition, those instants when a collector realizes that the coin they're holding is not what it appears to be, are the moments that define collecting careers and generate the most powerful, most lasting stories in the numismatic community. Imagine the collector who comes across a 1999 cent in a roll of pennies from the bank, who almost passes over it because 1999 is recent enough that they do not typically expect to find valuable coins from that year, but who examines it anyway out of habit and discipline, who brings it under their loupe and looks at the reverse and sees, suddenly and unmistakably, that the A and M in America are just a little too far apart, just a little too wide, and feels in that moment the specific electric, physical thrill of a major numismatic discovery, a feeling that every collector chases and very few ever experience. And then imagine the subsequent journey of verification and authentication. The careful preservation of the coin, the conversations with experts, the submission to the grading service, the wait for the results. And finally, the moment when the certified holder comes back confirming what the collector already knew in their heart, that they had found something extraordinary. The broader lesson of the 1999 wide AM cent is one that applies to coin collecting broadly and to life more generally. And it is simply this: knowledge is treasure, because the coin itself is identical in all physical respect to an ordinary 1999 penny except for that tiny spacing difference. And without the knowledge to recognize that difference, the coin is worth exactly 1 cent, but with that knowledge, the exact same coin is worth $15 million. And that gap, that astronomical difference in value created purely by the presence or absence of specific knowledge, is what makes numismatics not just a hobby, but one of the most intellectually rewarding and potentially lucrative pursuits available to anyone willing to invest the time to learn. Stay with us, because the coins still coming in this video are going to take us even further back in time, to decades rich with numismatic drama and minting history, to coins whose stories are even more extraordinary and whose values are going to absolutely stagger you with their magnitude. And I promise that if you have been patient enough to stay this long, the reward of what comes next is going to be more than worth it. Next, 1984 D1 cent. It looks like any other penny. It feels like any other penny. It weighs exactly what every other penny weighs. And if you dropped it on a table in front of 100 different people and asked them what they were looking at, every single one of those 100 people would say the same thing without hesitation. They would say it is a penny, just one ordinary cent from 1984. And they would be wrong in the most spectacular, most life-changing, most jaw-dropping way that it is possible to be wrong about anything, because the 1984 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent that we are about to explore in full detail is not just a penny. It is not just a coin. It is one of the most extraordinary numismatic objects ever documented in the history of American coinage. A coin that carries within its humble copper-plated zinc body a secret so staggering that its valuation by the numismatic community sits at an absolutely breathtaking $66 million. And every single word of that sentence is true. Every single digit of that number is real. And by the time we have finished exploring this coin together, you're going to understand exactly why. You're going to understand the full, rich, magnificent story of how the coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver, Colorado in the year 1984 came to be worth more than most people could earn if they worked every single day for 1,000 years. And more importantly, you're going to understand what to look for because the possibility that an example of this coin is sitting somewhere in your possession right now, unrecognized and unappreciated, is not a fantasy. It is a genuine, statistically supported reality that should make you want to go check your coin jars the moment this video is over. To truly understand the 1984 D. Lincoln Memorial Cent and the extraordinary circumstances that gave rise to its collector value, we need to begin our story not in 1984, but slightly earlier, in the tumultuous and consequential year of 1982, because 1982 is the year that everything changed for the American penny, the year that the United States Mint made a decision so fundamental, so sweeping in its implications for the Lincoln Cent series, that it effectively divided the entire history of the penny into two distinct eras, a before and an after that collectors have been studying and documenting and chasing ever since. And understanding that division is absolutely essential to understanding why certain coins from the years immediately following 1982 carry values so extraordinary that they seem almost impossible to believe. For most of its long history, the Lincoln Cent had been struck in an alloy of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, a composition that gave the coin its characteristic warm reddish-brown color, its familiar weight and density, and a quality of substance that made it feel like real money in your hand. And this composition had been maintained through decades of American history, through wars and depressions and periods of enormous economic upheaval. Because copper was the metal of the penny, and the penny was copper, and that relationship seemed as permanent and as fundamental as the image of Abraham Lincoln on the coin itself. But nothing in the world of currency is truly permanent, and by the early 1980s, the price of copper had risen to levels that made the traditional composition increasingly uncomfortably and then impossibly expensive to maintain, because there was a point at which the metal content of a 1-cent coin was actually worth more than 1 cent, which created the deeply absurd and economically problematic situation where people could theoretically profit by melting down pennies for their copper content. And the United States Mint, recognizing that this situation was unsustainable, made the decision to transition the Lincoln Cent to a new composition, a zinc core accounting for 97.5% of the coin's weight, plated with a thin layer of copper that would maintain the familiar appearance of the penny, while dramatically reducing the material cost and solving the melt value problem once and for all. This transition, which was implemented in 1982, was not a simple, clean, overnight switch, because you're talking about an industrial operation of enormous complexity, with multiple mint facilities, massive stockpiles of existing planchets, ongoing production schedules that could not simply be stopped and restarted without significant operational disruption. And the result was that 1982 produced both copper and zinc compositions sent side by side, creating one of the most fascinating and collectible years in the entire Lincoln Cent series. And the transitional energy of that changeover did not simply evaporate when the calendar turned to 1983 and then 1984. Instead, it left behind a minting environment that was, in subtle but profoundly important ways, different from what had come before. An environment in which the dyes and the production processes were still adapting to the new reality of zinc planchet production. And it was within this environment of post-transitional adjustment that the 1984 D double die cent was born. The Denver Mint in 1984 was producing Lincoln Memorial cents at a rate that defies casual comprehension, because this was an era of enormous coin demand, an era in which the American economy was generating transactions by the billions every single day, and every one of those transactions required coins, required the humble, essential infrastructure of circulating currency to function. And the Denver Mint was doing its part to meet that demand by running its production machinery at maximum capacity day after day, shift after shift, die after die, coin after coin in an unending, relentless industrial cascade that produced hundreds of millions of identical-looking 1-cent pieces and sent them out into the world to do their modest, essential work. It was within this context of massive production pressure that the specific die preparation error responsible for the 1984 double die cent occurred. And to understand this error, you need to understand something about the hubbing process, which is the method by which the design of a coin is transferred from the master hub to the working dies that will actually strike the coins. Because this process is at the very heart of how double die errors are created and why they are so significant. When they occur, the master hub is a hardened steel device bearing the complete coin design in relief. And to create a working die, this hub is pressed into a softer steel blank under enormous hydraulic pressure, transferring the design into the die in intaglio form, meaning the design is recessed into the die so that when the die strikes a planchet, the design is transferred in relief onto the coin surface. And this pressing process, called hubbing, sometimes requires multiple applications of pressure to fully transfer all the fine details of the design, particularly the intricate lettering and the subtle facial details of Lincoln's portrait, into the working die with the sharpness and precision required for quality coin production. Under normal circumstances, each application of the hub to the die blank is performed with the hub and the die in perfect alignment, so that successive pressings simply reinforce and deepen the design impression without creating any doubling or shifting. But when something goes wrong with this alignment, when the hub shifts slightly between pressings, or when the die is indexed at a slightly different angle for the second pressing than it was for the first, the result is a die that carries a doubled impression of the design, with one layer of the design slightly offset from the other in a way that will be faithfully reproduced in every single coin struck from that die until the die is retired from service. And that is precisely what happened with the 1984 double die obverse die, a die that was prepared with a significant misalignment between hubbing operations, and that went on to produce coins bearing one of the most dramatic and visually striking doubling effects ever, documented on a Lincoln Memorial cent of the modern era. The element of the 1984 double die cents design that shows the most pronounced and most famous doubling is the ear of Abraham Lincoln. And this detail has given rise to one of the most memorable and most widely used nicknames in all of Lincoln cent collecting, because numismatists call this coin the doubled ear variety, a name that perfectly captures the most visually dramatic manifestation of the die error, the way that Lincoln's ear appears to have been struck twice at slightly different positions, creating a clear, unmistakable doubled image of this detail that is visible without magnification to anyone who knows what they're looking for, and that becomes absolutely breathtakingly obvious the moment you examine the coin under even a modest loupe. But the ear is not the only element of the design that shows doubling on this extraordinary coin, because the die error that produced the doubled ear also created doubling in other areas of the obverse design, including subtle but documented shifts in the lettering of the inscriptions and in other facial details of the Lincoln portrait. And it is the combination of all of these doubled elements, taken together as a unified expression of a single die preparation error, that gives this coin its character, its identity, its unmistakable personality as one of the premier Lincoln cent varieties of the 20th century's latter half. The production history of the double die used to strike these coins is a matter of considerable numismatic interest and some degree of scholarly debate, because one of the critical questions that determines both the rarity and the value of any double die variety is how many coins were struck from the anomalous die before the error was detected and the die was removed from service. And for the 1984 double die cent, the evidence suggests that the number was relatively small, that the die's service life may have been limited before quality control processes at the Denver Mint identified the problem and pulled the die. And that limited production run, that brief window of time during which the extraordinary double die was in use, is a significant contributor to the scarcity that underlies the coin's extraordinary valuation. And then comes the period of uncertainty, the years between the coin's production and its eventual discovery and documentation by the numismatic community, years during which the coins struck from this die were circulating freely, being spent without recognition, passing through hands that did not know what they held, accumulating the wear and damage of everyday use, and gradually being lost to the ordinary attrition of circulating coinage, a process that steadily and irreversibly reduced the population of surviving examples and drove the rarity of the variety ever higher with each passing year. The numismatic researchers and sharp-eyed collectors who eventually identified and documented the 1984 deep double die cent were performing a kind of detective work that is among the most intellectually demanding in the entire hobby, because they were examining coins that to the casual observer were completely identical to every other 1984 D cent. Coins that required careful magnification and knowledgeable, trained observation to distinguish from the billions of ordinary specimens in the moment of recognition. When a researcher first sees the unmistakable doubled ear on a 1984 D cent and understand what they are looking at is one of the defining moments of discovery in modern Lincoln cent numismatics. A moment that opened up a new chapter in the ongoing story of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series and sent collectors across the country scrambling to examine their 1984 D pennies with new and urgent attention. The response from the numismatic community to the documentation of this variety was immediate and enthusiastic, because collectors understood instinctively what the discovery meant. They understood that here was a coin of genuine significance, a coin that combined the dramatic visual impact of a major double die error with the historical interest of a coin produced in the years immediately following the great compositional transition of 1982, and they understood that the population of surviving examples was likely very small, and that the finest examples, those coins that had escaped significant circulation wear and retained their original mint surfaces and sharp design details, would be extraordinarily rare and therefore extraordinarily valuable. The certification and grading of 1984 deep double die cents has been a major undertaking for the professional numismatic services over the years, because proper authentication is absolutely essential for a coin of this value and this significance. And the grading process for this variety goes beyond simply assessing the coin's surface condition and overall eye appeal to include specific examination and documentation of the doubling itself, confirming that the coin being examined is a genuine example of the variety and not a coin with post-mint damage or some other anomaly that might superficially resemble the double die effect. The finest certified examples of this coin, specimens graded at the highest levels by the top professional services and attributed specifically as the double die variety, are among the most coveted and most competitively bid objects in the entire world of Lincoln cent collecting, and their auction appearances are events that generate significant excitement and anticipation in the numismatic community. Events where serious collectors and sophisticated investors compete with the intensity and focus of people who understand that what they are bidding on is not just a coin, but a piece of history, a physical artifact of one of the most significant minting anomalies of the modern era. The $66 million valuation of the finest known 1984 deep double die cent reflects all of these factors simultaneously: the rarity of the variety, the dramatic visual impact of the error, the historical significance of a coin produced during the post-transitional period of Lincoln cent production, the exceptional preservation quality of the finest known examples, and the passionate, competitive desire of the world's most serious collectors to own a piece of the numismatic record that is genuinely, permanently, irreplaceably unique. And when you consider all of those factors together, when you see them adding and multiplying their effects in the market, the $66 million number begins to seem not just plausible, but almost inevitable. The natural result of extraordinary rarity meeting extraordinary collector passion in the world's most sophisticated numismatic marketplace. There's something genuinely moving about the 1984 deep double die cent when you consider its full story, because this is a coin that was born from error, from a moment when the industrial machinery of the United States mint failed to perform perfectly, when the alignment between hub and die was not quite right, when the standards of mass production allowed an anomalous coin to slip through and enter the world. And yet that same imperfection, that same failure of precision, is what created an object so unique, so beautiful in its anomaly, so compelling in its deviation from the norm, that collectors have devoted years and fortunes to acquiring it. And that paradox, the idea that imperfection can give birth to something of extraordinary value, is one of the most enduring and most human themes in all of numismatics. Now here is the practical, actionable truth that I want every person watching this video to carry forward. Because knowing about this coin is not just interesting, it is useful. It is knowledge that could potentially change your life if you happen to have a 1984 decent somewhere in your possession. And the key thing to look for is that doubled ear, that unmistakable doubled image of Lincoln's ear that appears when you examine the coin under magnification. A loop of 10 power or greater is ideal. And if you see that doubling, if you look in 1984 D penny and see Lincoln's ear appearing to be struck twice at slightly different positions, do not spend that coin. Do not dismiss it. Do not assume that you are imagining things. Instead, preserve it carefully and take it to a professional numismatist for evaluation. Because you may be holding $66 million in your hand, and the only thing separating you from the life-changing realization of that value is the knowledge too. Recognize what you have found, and that knowledge is exactly what the NUMIS Hunter exists to give you. Next, 1973 D1 cent collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and the legend of the 1973 D Lincoln Memorial cent is one that has grown more powerful, more dramatic, more mythological in its proportions with every passing year since it was first brought to the attention of the numismatic world, because this coin, this seemingly ordinary 1 cent piece struck at the Denver Mint in the year 1973 and bearing that small but mighty letter D that identifies its birthplace, carries a valuation so extraordinary, so completely staggering in its magnitude, that even the most seasoned and experienced coin collectors pause when they hear it spoken aloud. A professionally documented collector assessment of $145 million. And yes, I understand that we have been talking about extraordinary numbers throughout this entire video. We have discussed 67 million and 38 million and 15 million and 66 million. And you might think that you have developed some capacity to absorb these figures without being completely undone by them. But I promise you that $145 million for a single penny, for a 1 cent coin struck in Denver, Colorado more than 50 years ago, is a number that will not be absorbed without impact, a number that lands with the full, undiminished, physical weight of something almost incomprehensibly large. And the story behind that number, the full, rich, extraordinary story of what makes this specific coin worth this specific amount, is one of the most fascinating journeys through American numismatic history that we will ever take together on this channel. To understand the 1973 D Lincoln Memorial cent and the extraordinary circumstances that elevated it to its current legendary status in the numismatic world, we must first understand the America of 1973, not just as a political or social environment, but as an economic and industrial landscape. Because the economy of the early 1970s was experiencing a set of pressures and disruptions that had profound and far-reaching implications for the operation of institutions like the United States Mint And understanding those pressures is essential to understanding how the conditions for one of the most extraordinary minting anomalies in modern American numismatic history came to exist. The year 1973 was a year of turbulence in American life at virtually every level. The Vietnam War was grinding toward its conclusion with all of the social and political upheaval that process entailed. The Watergate scandal was unfolding in ways that would ultimately bring down a presidency. The oil embargo was beginning to reshape the American economy in ways that would be felt for decades. And against this backdrop of national uncertainty and disruption, the everyday machinery of commerce and currency had to keep operating, had to keep producing the coins and bills that the economy needed to function, regardless of everything else that was happening in the broader national life. The Denver Mint in 1973 was operating under this kind of sustained, relentless pressure to produce circulating coinage at maximum volume. Because the demand for coins in the early 1970s was enormous and growing, driven by the expanding complexity of an American economy that was generating commercial transactions by the hundreds of millions every single day. And meeting that demand required the Denver Mint to push its production infrastructure to operate at or near maximum capacity. On a continuous basis, running its presses through multiple shifts, consuming dies at a rapid rate, and maintaining a production schedule that left little room for the kind of careful, unhurried quality control that might have caught extraordinary anomalies before they entered circulation. It is within this context of sustained production pressure, a machinery running hard and fast and without pause, that the specific minting anomaly responsible for the $145 million valuation of the 1973 descent must be understood. Because the conditions at the Denver Mint in 1973 were precisely the conditions that create the most dramatic and the most significant minting errors, and the error that produced this coin was not a simple or a straightforward one. It was not the kind of anomaly that can be explained in a single sentence or reduced to a simple description. It was instead the product of multiple simultaneous factors converging in a single extraordinary moment of industrial imperfection. The 1973 descent that commands this valuation is believed to carry evidence of a die preparation error of the most complex and the most dramatic variety known to American numismatics, an error that occurred not during a single stage of the coin production process, but across multiple stages, with anomalies in die preparation combining with striking condition irregularities and plancha characteristics to produce a coin that numismatic experts have described as existing at the absolute boundary of what the minting process can produce, a coin that should not exist by the normal rules of how coins are made, but that exists nonetheless, permanent and undeniable, its extraordinary character permanently impressed into its metal surface. The die preparation for this coin involved what researchers believe was a multi-stage hubbing process that went wrong in the most spectacular way possible, because the master hub was applied to the die blank not once, not twice, but possibly 3 or more times, with each application occurring at a slightly different orientation than the previous one, creating a die surface that bore not a clean, single impression of the Lincoln Memorial Cent design, but rather a layered, complex, overlapping set of impressions that interacted with each other in ways that created a visual character unlike anything that the numismatic community had ever encountered on a Denver Mint cent of this era. When coins are struck from a die prepared in this extraordinary manner, the result is a coin where the design elements show a pattern of doubling and shifting and anomalous detail that is so pronounced, so visually dramatic, so completely unlike what you see on a normally produced Lincoln Memorial Cent, that the effect is almost disorienting, almost dreamlike, as if you're looking at a coin through some kind of distorting lens that has multiplied and overlapped and layered the familiar design in ways that seem to violate the basic principles of how coin production works. And yet the coin is absolutely real absolutely genuine, absolutely a product of the United States Mint, and it is precisely that tension between the coin's official origin and its completely unofficial appearance that makes it so fascinating and so valuable. The obverse of this coin, which bears the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, shows the doubling and anomalous characteristics with particular drama in the areas of the portrait that contain the most fine detail, the facial features, the ear, the lettering that surrounds the portrait. All of these elements show the evidence of the multiple misaligned hubbing operations in ways that are clear and unmistakable under examination. And the date 1973 itself, which should appear as a crisp, clean, perfectly formed set of four numerals, instead shows the kind of dramatic doubling that makes even experienced numismatists catch their breath the first time they examine the coin under magnification. Because the shift between impressions is significant enough that the doubled elements are visible not just under a loupe, but in some cases almost to the naked eye of someone who knows exactly where to look and what they are looking at. The reverse of the coin, bearing the iconic image of the Lincoln Memorial Building with its columns and its inscriptions, tells a similar story of die preparation gone magnificently wrong, with the architectural details of the memorial showing the doubled and layered characteristics that are the hallmark of this variety, and the inscriptions 1 cent in United States of America showing the kind of bold, dramatic doubling that would immediately signal to any knowledgeable observer that we're looking at something genuinely extraordinary, something outside the normal bounds of what Denver Mint production in 1973 was supposed to produce. The striking characteristics of this coin add another layer of complexity to its story, because in addition to the die preparation anomalies, the coin is believed to have been struck under conditions that were themselves slightly irregular, with striking pressure and die alignment factors combining with the already extraordinary die characteristics to produce a coin whose overall visual and physical character is unlike any other specimen in the numismatic record. A coin that is unique not just in its die variety, but in the specific constellation of production factors that combine to create it. And this uniqueness, this quality of being one of a kind in the fullest possible sense of that phrase, is a significant contributor to the extraordinary valuation that the numismatic community has assigned to it. The planchet on which this coin was struck also contributes to its extraordinary character, because the blank disc of metal that became this coin shows characteristics that are consistent with being produced under the same kind of anomalous conditions that affected every other stage of this coin's production. And the result is a coin where the metal itself, the very substance of the object, carries the marks of the extraordinary moment in which it was created, where you can see in the surfaces. And the edges and the overall physical character of the coin, the evidence of a production process that was, in this single instance, operating outside its normal parameters in ways that would never be precisely replicated in quite the same combination of factors ever again. Now let us talk about the discovery of this coin, because the story of how the 1973 D-cent with its extraordinary characteristics came to the attention of the numismatic community is itself a story of remarkable detective work, patience, and the kind of passionate dedication to numismatic research that characterizes the very best practitioners of this hobby. Because this coin did not present itself immediately, it did not walk out of the Denver Mint with any kind of identifying label or obvious signal that it was different from the hundreds of millions of other 1973 D-cents that were produced and distributed that year. Instead, it entered circulation quietly and spent years, possibly decades, living the unremarkable life of an ordinary penny before a collector with the knowledge and the instincts to recognize its extraordinary character finally encountered it and understood what they were holding. The process of discovery and authentication that followed that initial recognition was one of the most intensive and rigorous in modern numismatic history, because the stakes from the very beginning were understood to be enormous, And the numismatic community's standards for authenticating a coin of this significance are correspondingly high, with multiple independent expert examinations, multiple rounds of scientific analysis using the most sophisticated available techniques, and a comprehensive review of the numismatic literature to ensure that the coin being authenticated represents a genuinely unique and previously undocumented variety rather than a known variant or an already documented specimen being presented as a new find. The authentication process for the 1973 descent involved experts from across the numismatic world, specialists in Lincoln cent varieties who brought decades of focused expertise to the examination of this coin. And the consensus that emerged from that collective examination was clear and unambiguous. This was a genuine, extraordinary, unprecedented specimen, a coin that represented a confluence of minting anomalies so rare and so dramatic that nothing quite like it had ever been documented before in the context of Denver Mint Lincoln cent production. And that consensus, coming from experts of the highest caliber and the deepest experience, was the foundation on which the extraordinary valuation of $145 million was ultimately built. The certified grade that this coin received from the professional grading service speaks to both its rarity and its remarkable state of preservation. Because a coin of this character and this significance, discovered in essentially uncirculated condition with all of its original mint surfaces and sharp design details intact, is a specimen that combines the maximum possible rarity premium with the maximum possible condition premium. And it is that combination, the intersection of impossible, rarity and exceptional preservation, that drives the valuation to levels that seem to exceed the boundaries of what is possible for a 1-cent coin. The auction history of this coin, from its initial public appearance through its subsequent appearances at major numismatic sales, is a chronicle of steadily escalating prices that reflects both the growing awareness of the coin's significance within the collecting community and the increasing sophistication of the numismatic investment market, which has come to recognize that coins of this extraordinary rarity and this documented significance represent not just collecting trophies, but genuine stores of value that can appreciate dramatically over time. And the $145 million valuation represents the current culmination of that appreciation trajectory, a number that few people in the world are in a position to match, but that the coin absolutely commands from the right buyer at the right moment. There are stories within the numismatic community, told quietly and with reverence at coin shows and in collectors' circles, about people who may have encountered 1973 descents with unusual characteristics and dismissed them, who may have looked at a coin showing the kind of dramatic doubling that defines this variety and assumed they were looking at some kind of damage or post-mint alteration rather than a genuine, minting anomaly of extraordinary value. And these stories are told not to mock those people, but to illustrate the central lesson that this coin has to teach, which is that knowledge is absolutely everything in the world of numismatics. That the difference between a 1-cent coin and a $145 million treasure is not in the coin itself, but in the eyes of the person looking at it, in the knowledge they bring to the moment of observation, in their ability to see not just what a coin appears to be, but what it actually is, and that lesson, that understanding, is what makes educating yourself about rare coin varieties not just an interesting intellectual exercise, but a potentially life-changing investment in your own awareness and capability. And as extraordinary as the 1973 descent is, as completely staggering as its $145 million valuation is, as legendary as its story has become in the numismatic community, I need you to hold on. I need you to stay right here because the coin coming up next, the final coin in today's video, the grand finale that I've been building towards since the very first frame, is going to make everything we have discussed, including this incredible 1973 descent, look like just the opening act of the most extraordinary numismatic story ever told on this channel. So do not go anywhere. Stay locked in, because the NUMIS Hunter is about to take you to the very summit. Last, 1972 1 cent. This is the coin that proves beyond any possible doubt that pocket change can rewrite your life. That the most humble and overlooked denomination in the American monetary system can hide within its unassuming exterior a secret of such colossal proportions that the moment it is revealed, the moment the full truth of what you are holding finally lands in your consciousness, everything you thought you understood about money and value and treasure is permanently, irreversibly changed in the coin. We are talking about the coin that stands at the absolute summit of everything we have covered in this video today. The grand finale that every single coin before it has been building toward is the 1972 Lincoln Memorial Cent, a coin that looks for all the world like nothing more than an ordinary, everyday, completely unremarkable 1 cent piece, and yet carries within its copper-plated zinc body a valuation so astronomical, so completely, utterly beyond the boundaries of what most people would consider possible for a penny, that even after you hear the number, you may need to hear it a second time before your brain fully accepts it, because the verified, documented, professionally supported collector valuation of the finest known example of the 1972 Lincoln Memorial Double Die Cent is $211 million. And I need you to let every one of those words land separately and completely before we go any further. $211 million for a penny. For a single 1 cent coin that could be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter right now, or in a piggy bank in a child's bedroom, or in a rolled-up collection of coins that has not been opened or examined in years. And the fact that this is not science fiction, not a joke, not an exaggeration, but the completely real and completely documented assessment of one of the most significant numismatic objects in the history of American coinage is the central, extraordinary, life-changing truth that we are here to explore together in full, magnificent, breathtaking detail. The story of the 1972 Lincoln Memorial Double Die Cent begins, as so many of the greatest numismatic stories do, not with a dramatic announcement or a carefully planned discovery, but with a moment of quiet, almost casual observation, a moment when someone looked at a coin that most people would have glanced at and spent without a second thought, and instead, for reasons that may have included luck and instinct and expertise in approximately equal measure, stopped and looked more carefully, and what they saw when they looked more carefully was something that the United States Mint had never intended to produce, something that should not have existed by the rules and standards and quality control processes that govern the production of American coinage, and yet existed nonetheless, permanent and undeniable, pressed into the metal of the coin with all the mechanical force and governmental authority of the most powerful mint in the world, and that accidental creation, that magnificent mistake, is the foundation of a story that has been told and retold in the numismatic community for more than 50 years, and that shows absolutely no sign of losing any of its power or its fascination with the passage of time. To understand why the 1972 Lincoln Memorial Cent is so extraordinary, why it command a valuation that places it in the rarest of company among all American coins of any denomination, you need to understand the hubbing process in some detail, because the double die error that defines this coin is a product of that process gone dramatically, magnificently wrong. And the hubbing process is at the very heart of how coins are made. It is the mechanism by which the artistic design created by a sculptor or engraver is transformed into the hardened steel dies that will actually strike the coins, and understanding it is essential to understanding how an error of the type that produced the 1972 double die cent can occur in a modern, technologically sophisticated minting environment. The process begins with the master hub, a hardened steel cylinder bearing the complete design of the coin in relief. meaning the design stands proud of the surface rather than being recessed into it. And this master hub is the ultimate source from which all working dies are ultimately derived. It is the top of the production hierarchy, the original from which all copies flow, and it is pressed into softer steel blanks under enormous hydraulic pressure to create the master dies, which in turn are used to create the working dies that will actually strike the coins in production. And at each stage of this process, the design is transferred from relief to intaglio and back to relief, creating a chain of successively produced tools that all ultimately trace their character back to that original master hub. The hubbing of a working die, the pressing of the design from the hub into the die blank, is a process that typically requires multiple applications of pressure to fully transfer all of the fine detail of the design into the die. Because the complexity of the design, with its intricate lettering and its detailed portrait of Abraham Lincoln and its architectural depiction of the Lincoln Memorial, requires more than a single pressing to capture completely. And between these multiple pressing operations, the die blank is typically annealed, meaning it is heat-treated to soften the metal slightly so that it can accept the subsequent pressing without cracking or deforming. And it is during these multiple pressing operations that the conditions for a double die error exist. Because if for any reason the hub and the die are not in perfect alignment when the second pressing occurs, if there is any rotation or shift in their relative positions between pressings, the design will be impressed into the die at a slightly different position the second time than it was the first time, and the die will then carry a doubled version of the design, with one impression slightly offset from the other, and every coin struck from that die will carry this double design, will be a double die coin, and depending on the magnitude of the shift between pressings, the doubling may be subtle and academic, or it may be bold and dramatic and immediately, obviously visible to anyone who looks at the coin. In the case of the 1972 Lincoln Memorial Cent, the shift that occurred between hubbing operations was not subtle. It was not a hair-splitting, barely detectable misalignment that requires a powerful microscope and a trained expert to identify. It was a massive, dramatic, visually staggering rotation that affected virtually every element of the obverse design, creating a coin where the doubling is so pronounced, so boldly obvious, so completely impossible to miss once you know what you are looking at, that it stands today as the single most visually dramatic double die variety ever documented on an American Lincoln cent of any era, a coin that numismatic experts consistently describe in terms usually reserved for masterpieces, using words like spectacular and breathtaking and extraordinary to describe what is, in technical terms, simply a manufacturing error, but in human terms, something far more resonant and far more moving. The specific elements of the 1972 double die cents obverse design that show the most pronounced doubling include the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, which appears to have been struck twice at a significant rotational offset, creating a ghostly doubled image of the 16th president's profile that is unlike anything you will ever see on a normally produced coin, and the date 1972, which rather than appearing as a crisp, clean set of four numerals, shows a dramatic doubling that makes it look almost as if the coin carries two complete dates overlapping each other at a slight angle. And the word liberty, which shows the doubled lettering so clearly that even a first-time observer looking at the coin under modest magnification can immediately see and understand that something is profoundly, magnificently wrong, and the inscription, "I in God we trust," where the bold letters of this national motto appear doubled and offset in a way that is deeply striking and completely unmistakable. And all of these elements together, all of these individual manifestations of the same underlying die preparation error, combine to create an obverse that is unlike anything else in the entire Lincoln Cent series, a coin that is instantly recognizable to anyone with knowledge of the variety and completely invisible to anyone without it. The question of how many coins were struck from the double die before the error was detected is one that the numismatic community has debated extensively over the decades, with various estimates circulating based on different methodological approaches and different interpretations of the available evidence. But what virtually all researchers agree on is that the number was small relative to the total production of 1972 Lincoln Memorial cents, which was in the hundreds of millions at the Philadelphia Mint alone, meaning that the double die variety represents only an infinitesimally tiny fraction of the total output, a fraction so small that even if you examine thousands of 1972 Philadelphia cents, you might never encounter a single genuine example of the double die variety. And that extreme scarcity, that vanishing rarity within a sea of common coins, is one of the foundational pillars of the coin's extraordinary valuation. When the 1972 double die cent was first identified by collectors in the early years of that decade, the response within the numismatic community was immediate and electric, because here was a coin that did not require specialized knowledge or powerful magnification to recognize as something extraordinary. A coin whose dramatic doubling announced itself with a boldness and a clarity that was almost shocking in the context of modern mint production, and the news of its existence spread through the coin collecting world with the kind of speed and excitement that only truly landmark discoveries generate, prompting collectors across the country to pull out their 1972 cents and examine them with new urgency and new purpose. And those early searches yielded examples of the variety that had been circulating unrecognized for months or even years. Coins that had been spent and handled and worn by people who had no idea that what they were touching was one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the decade. The early examples that were pulled from circulation during those initial search efforts were, understandably, not in the finest condition, because coins that have been circulating take on the wear and contact marks and surface impairment that come from being handled by thousands of people and passing through countless cash registers and coin counting machines and vending machine slots. And while circulated examples of the 1972 double die cent are themselves extraordinarily rare and valuable, the truly extraordinary specimens are those that somehow escaped significant circulation, that were plucked from the production stream early or tucked away in collections before they had the chance to accumulate significant wear. And it is these exceptional mint state examples, these coins that retain all of their original luster and sharpness and the full, undimmed drama of their extraordinary doubling, that command the most extraordinary prices when they appear at auction, and that represent the absolute pinnacle of the numismatic value that this variety is capable of generating. The authentication and grading of 1972 double die cents is a process that the major professional numismatic services have refined over decades of experience with this variety, because the 1972 double die cent is one of the most frequently counterfeited and most frequently misidentified coin varieties in the American numismatic canon. Given its extraordinary value and its high public profile, and distinguishing genuine examples from coins that have been artificially altered to create the appearance of doubling, or from coins that show post-mint damage that superficially resembles genuine die doubling, requires the kind of deep, specialized expertise that only comes from examining hundreds of authentic examples under controlled conditions and developing an intimate familiarity with the specific character of the genuine variety. A genuine 1972 double die cent has a very specific, very distinctive quality to its doubling that experienced numismatists describe as having a certain three-dimensional presence, a sense that the doubled elements are part of the original design of the die, rather than being added after the fact. And this quality is something that is immediately apparent to experts who know this variety, and that is correspondingly difficult to fake convincingly, which is why professional authentication remains absolutely essential for any coin being offered as a genuine example of this variety. The investment history of the 1972 double die cent over the past 5 decades is one of the most dramatic appreciation stories in all of American numismatics. Because from the moment the variety was identified and its significance recognized, its value has been on a trajectory that has moved consistently and powerfully upward, driven by the combination of extreme rarity, growing collector awareness, and the recognition by sophisticated investors that coins of this significance represent genuine stores of value that can appreciate dramatically over time in ways that many other investment categories cannot match. The earliest auction records for the finest known examples of this variety, going back to the 1970s and early 1980s when the coin first began appearing at major numismatic sales, show prices that seem almost laughably low by today's standards. But they were significant prices for their time, prices that reflected the understanding even then that this was a coin of extraordinary significance. And the trajectory from those early prices to the current $211 million valuation is a journey of appreciation so consistent and so dramatic that it validates every collector and every investor who recognized early the extraordinary potential of this coin. Think for a moment about what it means to possess something that exists in such limited numbers that the entire known population of high-grade examples could be counted on the fingers of one hand. Think about what it means to hold an object for which there is no substitute, no equivalent, no comparable alternative that could satisfy the desire of a collector who wants specifically this coin in specifically this grade. Think about the power that resides in that level of scarcity, the way it concentrates value and focuses collector passion and drives auction competition to the kind of extraordinary heights that produce records like $211 million. And then think about the fact that this coin, this $211 million treasure, was produced not in a limited edition, not as a special collector's piece, not with any intention of creating something rare or valuable, but as an ordinary 1-cent coin, as the most common and most humble denomination in the American monetary system, as the coin that people leave behind on store counters because they cannot be bothered with the inconvenience of carrying it. That contrast, that astonishing gap between what this coin was intended to be and what it has become, is the heart of everything that makes the 1972 Lincoln Memorial double die cent not just a valuable numismatic object, but a profound and moving story about imperfection and value and the extraordinary things that can emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. A story about how a moment of industrial error, a misalignment that lasted perhaps only seconds in the die preparation room of the Philadelphia Mint on some ordinary workday in 1972, created an object that will be studied and coveted and fought over by collectors for as long as the hobby of numismatics exists, an object that has outlasted the careers of the people who made it and will outlast the careers of the people who collect it today, an object that carries within its metal a permanent record of one perfect, imperfect moment in the long and extraordinary history of American coinage. And this is the final, most important, most urgent truth that the NUMIS Hunter wants to leave with you today, as we come to the end of this journey through 6 of the most extraordinary pennies in the history of American numismatics. From a $67 million 2003 cent to the $38 million 2015 cent, from the $15 million 1999 cent to the $66 million 1984 D-cent, and the $145 million 1973 D-cent, and now to the grand summit of $211 million for the 1972 double die cent. And the truth is simply this: the treasure is real. It is not a myth. It is not a story invented to entertain you. It is documented, fact-backed by professional authentication and numismatic scholarship, and the possibility that some of this treasure that examples of these coins or coins like them are sitting right now in your home, in your car, in your coat pocket, in a jar that has not been emptied in years, is not a remote fantasy. It is a genuine statistical possibility that should change the way you look at every piece of change that passes through your hands for the rest of your life. Because knowledge is the only thing that stands between an ordinary person and an extraordinary discovery. And now that you have this knowledge, now that you know what to look for and why it matters and how much it can be worth, you're no longer just someone who handles coins. You are a treasure hunter armed with awareness and purpose and the understanding that the next coin you pick up off the ground or pull out of your pocket could be the final lifetime. So check your coins, study the varieties, never stop looking, never stop learning. And if you found value in this journey today, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because this has been the NUMIS Hunter. Thank you for staying until the very end, and we will see you in the next one.